Welcome to this masterclass where we're talking about AI and ethics and project-based learning. I'm delighted to be here today with Annabel, who's going to be sharing her insights and expertise in this space. And she's going to be sharing with you some of her experiences and how she thinks we should be approaching this. And I think this will be really helpful for educators and for schools in their thinking. And I suppose at Global Social Leaders, we want to support our educators to understand what the impact of AI will be on young people in their future, and then to think about what approach they need to take in supporting their students if they are going to be using AI now or in the future. But I don't want to say any more. I want to introduce Annabel, and I'd love you to say a little bit about your background and why you're with us today. Annabel.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting me. So I've got into AI in this sort of second portion of my career, having spent the first part in finance, and started to see some of the changes that AI was bringing. And I became convinced that this is going to change the way the world of work. And I wanted to be part of trying to make that happen in a way that's responsible and respectful of human well-being and enables us all to perform at our best and take some of the fear out of it, because I saw a lot of that. So I'm a big believer in education, and I went back to school and did my master's in AI ethics. And now I'm working to try and embrace a responsible technological future.
Well, it's so great to have you here. And I think everything is new at the moment. There's lots of people that are kind of going, this is going to transform the world, and kind of going, everyone has to embrace it. And then you've got others, the other side of the fence, saying, you know, we need to stop and ban this, and we don't know enough. So I think having someone with your sort of knowledge and expertise, and also just in terms of technology and ethics, being able to kind of be that steady ground in the middle and help us kind of think this through is going to be really helpful. So let's get into it. I want to kind of go big and bold right from the start of this conversation. So I just want you to think about, what do you think will be, and this is obviously your opinion, but what do you think the impact of AI will be on the future world of work?
Yeah, that is a big question. It's such a big question. It's very hard to do justice to in a sentence. I mean, I think this will be a profound change. For those people who might be watching this, who were here when the internet happened, I think this is of that magnitude and more. I think it will transform the way in which businesses run, organizations run, in which we interact with each other. So I think it's profound change. And I think that is, both offers wonderful opportunities and also areas for caution. So there are, there's some people who talk about it in terms of, well, with really good generative AI, it's like every single person in the world will have their own personal assistant. So that almost immediately doubles the amount of work that can be done. It helps you work smarter. It helps you do lots of things that you don't like doing. So we can potentially have a much, more productive economy. Or we could potentially work half the time, and instead of doing lots of things that we used to do, we can actually spend our time thinking, well, what do I feel really passionate about? So I think there are huge opportunities out there, but yes, we also need to do it in a way that's respectful and that puts humans at the heart of it, rather than us serving the technology, which can sometimes happen if we're not intentional about it.
Yeah, thank you. And I suppose I also remember that when Facebook came out and
right.
as a tool, and I was working with university students at the time, and I've created a whole platform, and I wanted the students to log in and use that, and they said, well, why didn't you use Facebook? What's that? And then that night the students created their own group, and I logged onto it, and all of the 90 students that have been at my program, my course, were logged onto this Facebook group, and we're all interacting. And for me, that was sort of like, oh, whoa, okay, what is this tool? And then I had to then learn how to use it, and then use it in my work at that phase. So that's again been sort of my take on this. When I've seen these new tools come out, I need to learn about them, how they work, and almost get ahead. So I understand, what both the benefits and the pitfalls can be.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the challenge now for educators who are so stretched.
Right.
It's incredible
to keep on top of it. Yeah, it's incredibly hard to keep on top of it. And perhaps that's somewhere we could ask for a bit of help from the tech industry itself. Maybe a bit of outreach from tech into education would be useful. And it could be good for tech as well, because it's a way of engaging the next generation of workers and helping to develop that talent, and to do so in a way that, you know, doesn't take away but adds to what's available for educators.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And maybe we'll talk about that a bit more later. So let's turn to schools and to education. And I suppose I'm thinking about your two hats of both your knowledge of AI and ethics, and also your role as a trustee of a school. And I suppose I'm interested in what you think schools should be doing now to prepare young people for a future. And we've just talked about that future world of work is going to have a massive impact of AI. So I'm interested in what you think schools should be doing at this point in response.
Yeah, I mean, should be is a big call, because I know, as you rightly say, I mean, schools are dealing with crumbling buildings and, you know, a million other things. So obviously resources are stretched, but in an ideal world, I think there's a whole range of things that can and should be done. And the first thing is identify, I mean, the most obvious area is for those kids who are interested in coding and have that kind of mindset, because actually the earlier you get started, the better. So it's a bit like learning a language, you know, don't wait until you go off to university, you know, and incorporating that in kind of play as early as possible is super useful. But it's not just limited to those who are interested in technology. When you think about some of the things that have happened over the last year, such as AI winning an art prize, or, you know, the creation of a new song by Drake that he wasn't even involved with, you know, AI is actually integrating in art, literature, music, in every form of everything that kids might study. So whatever your subject matter, I think it's worth engaging with, looking at exactly how technology is impacting on that particular area, and introducing some of that with kids. I mean, it's even something you can discover together in some ways. I mean, sometimes the kids are going to be a little bit ahead of the adults in terms of what's the latest thinking. So actually discovering it together and trying to help facilitate that, but in a way which, you know, gives some guide rails and some guidance and is supervised, I think is helpful. But mostly it's worth, you know, a lot of this stuff is now available for free. I mean, one of the big developments this year with ChatGPT and some of the other generative AI is just making it available to everybody everywhere. So all you actually need is a computer, and then a bit of time and the sense of play. So I would encourage teachers to incorporate it almost as part of the learning, almost integrate it into the subject matter, because honestly, that's where this is going in the future.
Yeah, I like that. And I think the word that came out there a few times was play. And I think that's been a parallel with one of the other masterclasses that I've done recently, where we were saying that the importance of actually just playing with some of the tools yourself, and seeing what the output is. And often it's surprising,
Yeah.
and then seeing whether it comes up with suggestions or ideas, and that's
Absolutely. And also, this hasn't been written yet. Nobody knows. I mean, how it can be used is an evolving field. There isn't a book you can go and read, and there isn't a video you can go and watch that will tell you how it's going to be. We will be discovering this together. We're all on a journey of discovery together. And actually, that, you know, the kids who are at school today will be the ones who are working with this as much as, you know, people who are in the workforce already. So it's all ahead of us. You know, there isn't an itinerary or a sort of framework to follow.
I think it's that concept of almost that, I suppose, that beauty and future of education. We have this idea of actually learning together.
Right.
This is actually an instance where we truly can, because the teacher isn't necessarily the expert here. So actually sitting alongside, exploring some of these tools and seeing what the output is, and then critically assessing that together.
Right.
And we create sort of a remarkable learning experiences, where the sort of the power and the knowledge is shifting a little bit.
Yeah, genuine partnership actually between educators and educated.
So I'm, I suppose, interested to see what you think will be the potential benefits of young people, I suppose, using some of these AI tools, or I suppose having access to them alongside their educators and parents.
Yeah, well, I mean, like we mentioned earlier, I mean, firstly, it's a huge productivity tool, and it means that anything that you do can have a much greater reach than was ever the case in the past. So, I think there's huge opportunities. Obviously, when these kids when people at school today go out into the workforce, this is going to be part and parcel of how they work. So the more familiar they are, the better place they are to do that. But I think also it can help make an idea that somebody has in their bedroom somewhere actually become a reality, that suddenly you have a huge amount of resources at your fingertips that just you as an individual, you and a couple of friends can make possible. And in some ways I think actually it'll be that generation that most can grasp the opportunities and benefits through this new technology, because they're not already baked in the existing way of doing things. So they'll be looking at the genuine transformative power that it offers. So I have real hope. It's one of the causes of optimism. There's quite a lot of causes for pessimism and all sorts of people talking about tech dystopias. But one of my sources of optimism is this next generation can do amazing things that hasn't been the case for any generation in history, that they've had the sort of power that this generation coming through is going to have. So helping them navigate some of that safely, I think, is possibly one of the most helpful things that we can do. But I think they will lead the way in a way.
I like that. I like that idea of helping young people, if they've got ideas, bring them to life. And actually, the fact that they can, I think that learning experience can be huge. And I think that's sometimes the big challenge for education and preparing young people for the world of work, is that we're seeing that work experience isn't being offered by organizations in the same way that it was pre-COVID.
Right.
And so some of these, so actually young people getting exposure or experience of the real world is increasingly challenging. And education almost being, I suppose, being challenged by university being expensive, and young people thinking, is my education going to prepare me for an AI-powered future? So they're asking more questions about, will I have a job in the future? So there is that well-being issue that I think we're seeing for young people, where they are worried and concerned about the future, whether there will be a job, what a job will look like. And I think how we can almost help them is by actually giving them opportunities to learn, to develop ideas for the problems they see. And if we give them back almost the mandate to come up with ideas to solve some of these things.
I think it should be really empowering.
That's empowering. So I think that is quite an exciting reality. But I am interested in what you also see as the drawbacks. So what are they?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest ones is understanding who to trust and what to trust, and how do you validate information when there's a profusion of information, and particularly with generative AI, it's wonderful that you've got the entire resources of the internet, but how do you sift through? And at the moment, ChatGPT can't do that. It can't actually tell you, it can't sort of verify sources. And everything sounds plausible. So in a way, it's almost more confusing. So actually understanding how to sift through and what to trust and how to validate information, I think is going to be a really necessary skill. I think we haven't, we've had institutions and we've had methods for ascertaining, what we can and can't trust in the past, and they don't work anymore. They don't work in this new environment. So there's that. I think another area is I think there's growing awareness that some of what we need and some of what makes us happy as humans isn't necessarily well aligned with how tech works. So we know that we increasingly socialize, or we spend more and more of our kind of socializing budget online, but actually communicating through a screen doesn't have anything like the sort of happy effects of communicating in person. So there are costs to doing everything through technology as well. And remaining mindful of what works for us as humans, what brings out the best in us, and making sure the tech serves us rather than us serving the tech, I think is going to be really important for happiness and well-being.
Fantastic. And I think whilst we're sort of looking at how young people can embrace and use technology and AI, I think in parallel, we almost need to be thinking about how young people can spend more time in nature.
Yeah, absolutely. And with each other,
And yeah,
properly connecting.
yeah.
100%.
And that sort of combined energy, almost looking at how
and learning. So, one of the downsides of having everything there, like that you mentioned before, is there any point going on to university? Do you just go straight into the workforce? Is there any point learning anything when you've got the entire resources of the internet? But actually, we get something out of learning, and learning can be partly skills based, and I'm sure we will move closer to skills and away from information. But I think it's really important that we don't, one of the greatest sort of current thinkers about AI is a guy called Stuart Russell, and his dystopian future that he thinks is most likely is actually Wall-E. It's not the Terminator. It's the fact that we all float. I don't know if you've seen the film Wall-E, but it's the fact of us sort of checking out and just being entertainment sponges, because the AI does everything for us. And I think it's really important that we don't do that we continue to engage and we continue to learn, because that also is what helps us develop and grow and be happy and fulfilled individuals. So we shouldn't be abdicating everything to the technology either. We do need to stay engaged.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I suppose, what would be your message to teachers who have concerns about using AI tools themselves and or encouraging their students to do so?
Yeah, it's absolutely fair to have concerns. This is all new and untested stuff, and there's lots of reason to be concerned, but hiding from it's not going to help. It's coming anyway, and for your kids or for the kids in your care, to be able to navigate that safely means engaging with it and helping to figure out that that technological literacy, and how to do it responsibly, and how to identify when there are issues, and how to know when to escalate something, or when to ask for supervision or help. And I think doing that together is definitely better than just thinking you can close the door on it, because really you can't. It's coming.
Okay, so with that in mind, I suppose teachers might be wanting to embrace it, but they're also responsible to the parents.
Yeah, of course.
So I suppose, what would be your message to
the parents? Well, that you want to equip your kids to be able to deal with this, rather than to be victims of it. What you don't want is for kids to be experiencing this for the first time in their working life, and either finding that their employment prospects are harmed by virtue of never having had exposure and experience with it, or that they're making all those mistakes for the first time when they're on their first job. And that they don't know they don't have the skills to navigate it safely. You don't want to create a kind of, if you're really worried about it because you think it's a powerful tool, then the last thing you should want for your kids is that they go into that naively without any skills to how to navigate it. It's really, really important that we train and equip our children to be able to manage those risks and do so in a way that benefits them.
I suppose my thought is that I think to parents is that they should be trying out and playing with the tools.
Well, that too, yes.
And sometimes they'll be quite surprised with the outcomes. And I suppose that's what I've been doing personally, just putting different things in. And actually, I've been co-authoring with my son a book about his teddy, and exploring some adventures.
Oh, that's brilliant.
We've combined the story of him and his teddy going off and doing missions around the world with learning about Egypt and the pyramids. And brilliant. Then we've also then combined it with James Bond missions. So it's actually brought in that he's learned all about different aspects of M and Q and MI6. But what's fascinating though is now he sort of has started to reject the tool. He's like, actually, I prefer your ideas.
Oh, nice.
He's like, who's writing the story? And I was like, and I was thinking, this is great. We can write it, put a different prompt in, and we'll get a new story each night. And he's like, no, you're not allowed to cheat. So it's just been interesting.
Not letting you off the hook.
Being, as I've been embracing it, his response as being almost, no, I almost prefer the real person coming up with it. So, but I almost now have to go to it for some new ideas. What am I going to come up with tonight? Because our stories have become, quite crazy now.
You've set the bar really high.
The bar is high. So So now I suppose I want to talk to the next sort of big stage of concern is about data privacy and security. So I suppose, do you have any kind of sort of tips or advice around how, you know, when using these tools, especially with young people, that we manage that side?
Yeah, I mean, we spoke earlier about the ODI, the Open Data Institute, who have got a lot of really good resources, and I'm sure we can link to that. So that's a helpful resource. I mean, there is legislation coming in as well around, you know, online safety and protections for kids. I think learning to be responsible ourselves with data helps figure out some of what we might wish to navigate. And, you know, as we were talking earlier as well, you can, in some cases, upload, you know, there are packages that you can upload. You can ask the AI that you're operating with to do it under a particular framework. So it's not foolproof yet, but these tools continue to enhance and develop. So I think, you know, nothing is perfect, but I think there are some tools that can help navigate that.
Yeah, and I suppose I was at the Cottesmore conference, and that's with their big advice was don't put anything in there that's sensitive. You don't need to put any names, and just see it as a tool, but almost that you are putting it into almost a public sort of platform. And almost, if you think about it from that point of view, that it's not private.
No. Only put in it what you'd be willing to publish on the internet.
Exactly.
Because that's basically what you're doing.
Yeah. So if you were going to publish a page on the website and you want to get feedback on it, actually the page was going to go in the public domain anyway. So it's just about getting input on it. And I suppose that's things. If you're working on something that's going to go into the public domain, as long as you don't put anything sensitive in, then actually you can come and use some of these tools and get input. But especially for now, I think the biggest advice is don't put anything in that's private or sensitive. So I suppose, sort of moving on from that side, I suppose I'm interested in what you think are, how do we help students to understand the potential sort of ethical implications of using AI, especially as they may be using AI to help with their social action projects, and that's where, you know, that's what we're working on, is helping young people think about what the issues they care about, how can I help them, doing a project to do that, and how can AI help them do those projects potentially in a better way and have deeper impact. But I'm interested in what you think might be the ethical implications of doing that.
Yeah, I think, well, there's a few ways of looking at this. I mean, I think the sense of bias in algorithms and data has become, you know, better understood in the last 2 or 3 years, and there's been some good work. I mean, one resource is looking at the film The Social Dilemma, which covers some of this, and an organization called the Algorithmic Justice League have some good resources on their website, and a number of use cases. And I think doing some case studies where you look at how where you can see how something that started out as a really good idea ended up, you know, risking some harm because of some of the bias in the data. What we see with AI and algorithms generally is they'll find patterns, or they'll use the data that we have, but that will mean that wherever there's a bias, because say people only asked men this question in the past, or only asked women this question in the past, then that doesn't mean that's a full picture. It just means that's who was asked. And so you've got this kind of, I suppose it's the bias you get in history. I do actually think learning history, strangely enough, has some really helpful tools with navigating the information landscape in technology, because you get that same, what data do we have? And is there an agenda from that? And what do we not have? And being really aware of the gaps as well. So I think awareness of that kind of algorithmic bias is helpful, and there are a ton of case studies we can use for that. I think also there's thinking about bias in design. Most of the time when there's ethical fails, it's not because anyone's set out to do something wrong, it's because there's been a blind spot that they haven't spotted. So bringing in the diversity of perspectives, I think, can be really powerful. And again, that's another thing that can be taught in a classroom or workshopped together, that the more perspectives you bring in, the more robust your understanding of the issues, and the more you might become aware of something that you personally hadn't thought of, because it doesn't affect you, but the person sitting 2 or 3 seats next to you with a different experience has quite a different understanding of what might be the second or the third order effects of something that you might be thinking about doing. Again, there are some useful frameworks. I'm delighted to say that quite a lot of good organizations have been doing some really good work on this over the last few years. So there are some ethical frameworks that can be used as a sort of work through from point 1 to point 7 or what have you, and think about each time we're thinking about using AI and technology, have we thought through, issues of transparency? Have we thought through all the people who could be affected and how many of them, their voices are in the room? So making sure that everybody who's affected is heard, I think is the ideal that we're striving towards. Nothing about us without us, I think is the watchword.
Like that. And I suppose the bit that I'm thinking about is this diversity of voices. And I think that also can be maybe the biggest challenge here. That I think what I'm seeing is that the schools that are embracing AI already and teaching their educators and young people about AI are typically schools operating outside of the state sector.
Yeah.
And what that could mean is, that the future is that young people who are better prepared for utilising AI and coming up with the next solutions it's going to be a relatively advantaged group. And I suppose
privilege reinforces often. That's the case, isn't it?
Yeah.
But we do have an opportunity to redress here because there is a democratization about some of these tools. They are available if people could just get access to them. It's not, there isn't a price for entry in the same way. And I also think that young people have sort of probably feel that their voices are underrepresented in most of the discussion that we have. You see that with politics in particular. And so there's a real opportunity through technology to have that kind of rebalancing and actually hear the diversity across age groups.
Yeah, and I suppose the bit that I suppose I've seen before, like with Silicon Valley, it's been a small group of people that have created the organizations that then have massive influence on the world.
Right.
And we're seeing that sort of increasingly so. But interestingly, with things like the cloud, actually smaller organizations can actually operate and launch organizations. And I think it's in the gaming industry, they actually see that 1-2 people organizations with the power of the cloud are actually going to be able to launch games and sell them globally, and they won't necessarily need the massive organization. So I think it is an interesting kind of message, maybe, that actually young people from every background. But I just want to maybe push a bit more into, how do we make sure that diverse backgrounds get to access to AI and are educated about these ethical implications? And just if you've got any more that you're sort of thinking about in that space.
I mean, schools are the place where that can happen, isn't it? And I do wonder if there's scope to do some outreach with some of the tech companies in terms of their engagement with state schools specifically, precisely because of that. I mean, one of the messages that you do get from the tech sector is a general sense of wanting to find talent, and that talent exists everywhere, not just in the private schools. And so it should be in the interest of the tech companies to try and want to uncover talented, energetic young people. So if there is a way of helping them engage and provide access for schools in the state sector to some of their either equipment or design teams, or there's something in technology called a hackathon, which is where you get a number of people together and you try and solve a problem in a really short space of time, and you have a couple of programmers there who help you facilitate the kind of technological possibilities. But through this really kind of intense, short-lived process, you actually try and create some solutions. And I think that might be an area where it could be really beneficial both ways around. It could be beneficial for the tech firms to get ideas and perspectives they would never get from their existing staff, that they could get through teenagers that come from a school, and meanwhile that those kids get access exposed to the kind of tools that are available, and see those companies in action. So I think stuff like that would be super useful.
Yeah, and it just brings me back, actually, as I was telling you, Annabel, about the story where at the Cottesmore conference in 90 minutes, with Darren Coxon's guidance, he challenged us to create a concept of a new school, to come up with its vision, its mission, its values, then to create things like its staffing structure, what would that be different if it was informed by the vision and mission, and then to do a marketing strategy for it, and to create the different spaces that would exist within the school. And I suppose one of the reflections I had was how enjoyable that learning was, and how excited and engaged everyone in the room was. And there was me and a leader, a head teacher of a school, and the marketing manager of the British International School of Ukraine. We're working a little team, and we created the Cosmic Campus. And we really sort of collaborated and worked together and came up with ideas, inputted it, and then saw the responses coming through, and then created the design of it. And we're very proud of our work at the end. And I thought this sort of learning experience and journey we'd been on together was enjoyable, fun, interesting, and got us really thinking about different ways schools could be designed. And whilst it was probably a very futuristic concept we came up with, there were ingredients in there that were like, oh, actually, those could actually be really good ideas. And they were kind of things that we've been thinking would be good for schools, but almost it sort of verbalized it in a way that was created then a conversation that we could then have together. So that almost combination of real people working alongside these tools and seeing what comes was immensely powerful. And I think that potential within the classroom, where young people can have the support of these tools to learn to develop their learning and engage them in the learning process, is immensely exciting. So I'm conscious of your time, and I think it's been immensely valuable to kind of hear your experiences and knowledge on this area, and to see that you think we should be exploring this further, especially with your sort of background around the potential implications on ethics and that understanding. So, and I think you've shared some really helpful places to go and look to get more information and guidelines. So that's been super helpful, and we'll be sharing those. And I suppose that's what's next for us, is that we want to support our schools, our young people, to be knowledgeable and to be able to easily access this kind of expertise, so that we can all learn together. Whether AI has a place in helping young people learn about and develop their projects, and we always do see that in the realm of social action and real world projects, this is the space where AI does need to have a place, and is a place maybe where schools can play with it, prior to maybe using it more within the school. So I just didn't know if you had any final words that you want to share, Annabel, before we finish this session.
No, just really to reiterate that yes, of course there are reasons to be concerned and careful, but not engaging is not the answer. This is coming, and it's got hugely positive opportunities and potential, and the best way of us making sure it's safe is to engage with it and choose that future. So I would just encourage everybody to play responsibly, I suppose.
I like that. So we'll finish on that. Play responsibly, and learn from one another. And I thank you for your support and guidance in our approach and our strategy on this. And
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Annabel.